Hello, how's it going? So the past month been a little bit quiet on the YouTube channel. That's mainly because a lot of the projects around the museum and sorting it out for next year have been a little bit boring. I mean, I can't imagine videos being like, oh, look at this plasterboard. You know, I can't imagine those are very interesting videos. They are, but like, I'm just basically sorting it out right now, trying to make sorting out some of the back rooms, because ultimately trying to make it a little bit bigger, having a bit of a rearrange, because the first time it opened for the season, this past season, it was good, people enjoyed it, but there was always room for improvement. So it's going around for round 2, getting ready to open again, and hopefully the next time it opens up, hopefully also, depending how all of the current thing works out, with the Ramsgate Micro Museum as well, hopefully at the same time sort of thing. Trying to figure out ways of making it viable to potentially be open more of the time around the year. More year round? I don't know how that works. There's a lot to put in place. Obviously it's just a big job to put a museum together. So it's always baby steps, and who knows, let's see how it goes, but working towards just making it a bit bigger and a bit better for the next time round. And currently, there's been a little bit of a pause on the telecommunication stuff. That includes the RayCal stuff and the telephone exchange stuff, this and that, purely because there's something that might happen or might not. We'll try and figure it out, and it very much defines what is happening with all of the telecommunication stuff. I'll talk about it if it comes off, and if not, we'll be talking about how the setup's going to be changing over there. And it's still sticking to the plan of being able to buy the museum. One of the main projects by the next time it will be open is you'll be able to call in the museum and call through the exchange and try and call, I'm not going to say all, but a number of things around, for instance, synthesizers, listen to it, talk to people on the toilet if you really want, because there's going to be a telephone next to the toilet. Things like that, silly things. Also, I've been sorting out that toilet. That's been one of the jobs. It's not specifically the toilet, but just the room. It had a false ceiling, so been taking that down, sorting it out, and giving it space to actually make it interesting in there, because obviously it's quite there's interesting things around the building, so there may as well be interesting things in the toilet, of course. All of these jobs and stuff like that, there'll be definitely updates on videos soon, but none of them have got to the point where it really justifies a video, except for just look at this pile of random castaway bits of old table and bits of wood and dusty piles of stuff. You know, it's just not that interesting. And then also there's hopefully a video very soon. I want to thank you to the people who've sent things in recently. Thank you very much. I'm gonna put a video together on the certain things, bits and bobs here and there, because yeah, ultimately it's just a lot to do, but I've not forgotten about these things. Thank you very much for the things that have been sent in. There's been one that turned up today, for instance. Oh, dropped it. Thank you very much, Andy, for these really cool displays. Oh, I'm trying to get in focus. And they're quite interesting, actually, because they already have character sets inside them, so they have their own brains. And then it's a case of programming and using the brains. I'm definitely going to plug them in and get them going. There's just mountains of jobs. Enough blabbing. Oh, talking about blabbing, I'll talk about it anyway. So regardless, with the telecommunication stuff, the telephone exchange stuff, there's now awesomely a mate called Chris, local mate called Chris, give us a hand. Oh my God, it was heavy. With another friend and his son, an MDF, a UAX13 MDF. This is the bit that deals with the input and the output of the phone calls to the UAX13 setup, the UAX being the telephone exchange setup that I've currently got. And also at the same time managed to get hold of an empty B rack. So there's the MDF, which is the C rack, and that originally held the ringtone setup and stuff like that. Alas, the ringtone stuff has been Frankensteined on this one. The B rack, nothing in it. It usually held, well, actually I'm not I haven't looked really up on it, but it might have held the call timers, which are actually down at the bottom now. But it's worth figuring it out, that stuff. By the way, if you haven't seen it already, the pendulum video of syncing up the pendulum, the master clock of the whole museum, is wired in. The link for that video is below. That was sorting it out because that was one of the first rooms that I sort of started working on after the last open day of the museum this year. It was about clearing it out. It used to have a few computers and stuff sat around, but now that's purpose built for it. And around the corner to that will be the Brawl and Cure setup. Yeah, and well, it has the sync box. I'm waiting for a circuit board to turn up to test whether the sync box circuit board will work, and then it'll be a case of building these sync boxes around the whole museum to sync things up. And one of these things that will be synced up is what we're going to talk about now. Finally, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. So I was looking the other week on a auction called Vemia, Sphere Music Vemia. I'm not sure what it stands for. It says on the website top, and I've completely forgotten. The Electronic Musical Instrument at auction, but I can't remember what V stands for. Very electric. I can't remember, but there was a Vemia auction, and there was what caught my eye initially, because usually these Vemia auctions, they've got some really high-end stuff, way out of my budget, way out of the museum's budget, all of that stuff. But I spotted something that was up. It was a Digisound modular synth, Digisound 80, and this is an old late 1970s, early 80s, I think. Maybe it's early 80s because it's got CEM chips in it. It's an old magazine DIY synth. You get the magazines and you build the synths. It was quite like we spoke about these before. Like there's loads of different types of these magazine subscription style synthesizers from the late 70s, early 80s kind of thing. And this is one of them. The great thing about this one is it's quite a few of the modules are based on Curtis chips. So the Curtis CM3340, for instance, which I think is a good chip for VCOs, voltage controlled oscillators, because they do reduce the kind of some of the complications involved in making VCOs, and it actually simplifies the process. And some people aren't a fan of them, but I think it gets to a little bit like snake oil after that. I think they do a very adequate job, and especially the CEM3340As, where there's quite a lot of the problems that they have are being somewhat ironed out in it. So I was really keen on trying to get hold of this. I set kind of a max of what I would be able to afford to get it, and lo and behold, it went over that. It went quite a bit over that. But I was looking through the auction after that, and I noticed a few pages later there was another magazine-based synthesizer from the 70s, another sketchy DIY synth that was sat from the 80s, late 70s, and that one, luckily, I noticed it just as it was finishing. I just put a bid in, and it was about £20 more than what I was willing to pay for the other one, and managed to get hold of it. And lo and behold, this one ends up having a fair few more modules than the Digisound. But yeah, it's a very different type of DIY synthesizer. Anyway, I'll stop talking about it and I'll show you it. Oh, it is the Formant Musical Synthesizer. The Formant Music Synthesizer. So lo and behold, I got hold of this for the museum. The thing about these 1970s DIY synthesizers, I've talked about a lot, talking about with the Transcendent, for instance, which is another DIY synthesizer, the SWTPC Psychtone and things like that. They're all vastly different. They're all like very unique to whoever built them, and they all vary massively in the quality at which they have been made, obviously, because they've been built by hobbyists and stuff, most of them anyway. And since this museum's not obsolete, it's about obsolete and experimental technology, this really kind of works with that, these DIY synthesizers. The thing is, it would be great if there were things like, crazy things like CS80s and Lindrums and all those 808s and stuff. Number one, way out of the budget, and number two, it's just like, it's quite scary to have valuable things like that. It wouldn't really work sitting around. And these sort of things, in my opinion, have a lot more character. They're a lot less desirable than fancy, expensive synthesizers. I think they have a lot more soul and interesting things than, kind of fancy, very fancy synthesizers. These things have been homemade. They don't work necessarily 100%. Not everything probably works on this and stuff like that. And the other reason I got hold of this was because I think it would make a really good collection of videos on it. Basically just looking through the whole thing, because like I mentioned with the DigiSound 80, that one is based on CEM chips. That's one kind of theme of modular synthesizers that has actually carried through to nowadays. So that kind of idea of getting hold of Curtis chips, making modules with them, that's kind of carried through. And this is another style of modular synthesizer DIYing that has still carried through to today. And amazingly enough, like for instance the VCO circuits. And for instance, the VCO circuits have a lot in common with a lot of VCO designs, analog VCO designs in DIY hobbying nowadays. For instance, you'll notice that there's a lot of crossover between, I don't know, like I'm just for instance, Music from Outer Space or Jürgen Heibel, for instance, or something like that. These are built in a similar sort of fashion. But another reason for getting hold of this, for like a bunch of videos, a collection of videos, is they are quite similar to modern DIY synthesizer designs, and the other amazing thing is they are very, very well documented. This is a printout of the translation of the original Elector Formant synthesizer book, Music Synthesizer Formant, and it's really good. It's in English, and it covers everything. Everything you need to know about the Formant synth is sat in here. So basically, what I'm going to do is I need to get it working first. We'll have a chat about it in a sec, what we need to do first. And then it'll be about looking at nearly every module and just having a look, see if we could get them working, and then also talking through the principles, mainly sort of following through this, because there's some interesting parts and stuff that you'll be able to pull away that you will be able to see in an actual practical form, as well as well-written book kind of form, which is very interesting. And you can get a hold of this. I will include the link below to the PDF of this. It's quite a good read. I have read through it once fully, and I've managed to put some bits upside down. So this synthesizer has 4 VCOs. 2 of them have been modified. It looks like there's octavers. There's a 24 dB voltage controlled filter. Usually the setup of these is 3 filters, a state variable filter, and a VCF. The thing is about the filters as well is they are very similar to modern style kind of filters, the kind of approach you would do for this kind of filter, using transconductance, op amps and stuff like that. And then there's an RFM, which is really quite interesting actually. It's basically just 3 bandpass filters that you can tune to make resonant kind of peaks. I've got something similar to this with 2 on my bassline channel on Cosmo at home, where there's 2 bandpass filters that you can tune between, like, apart separately from each other, and it sounds really interesting. And I've been meaning to make a Cosmo module like this, but quite a few more bandpass filters all in parallel. That'll be interesting to look at. There's a mixer, waveform processor, not sure what that's doing yet, dual VCA, 2 ADSRs, a triple LFO, ring modulator, CQ ADSR VCA, not sure what that is, maybe it's a sample and hold thing, noise, multiple jacks, and then this also came with a keyboard controller. However, the a module that connects between the keyboard controller and this, not present. In fact, it's got the front panel, but the back of it isn't present. So this is possibly why it didn't really go for as much as the DigiSound is. Well, if we have a look around the back. Oh my God. So if you've ever looked at Formant synthesizers or have ever had experience with Formant synthesizers, you'll notice that this is a little bit hodgepodged compared to what the Formant synthesizer setup usually is like. Usually, as far as I'm aware, is they have these sockets, and I have no idea. Maybe somebody knows where these sockets are. The plan I have is probably not to use these sockets, but to be honest, if anybody knows where to get these fudging sockets, that might actually change this project completely. So I'm kind of glad I'm putting this video up actually. So if anybody knows of the whereabouts to get these sort of sockets, please let me know. Well, what's going on in the back is quite a mess. So originally, the Formant synthesizer design actually had patching around the back. And my personal opinion on patching around the back, especially for a synthesizer that is made to be used in a museum, is I don't think it's very helpful. The problem is any hidden signal flow between modules around the back, unless you know the synthesizer inside out, can tend to be a little bit confusing. For instance, another DIY modular synthesizer that's in the museum has been a little confused a few people trying to use it, because there's a few wires that are connected to modules around the back, and it's not really described. And that's what this has. It's got a couple of buses that connect between them. For instance, I think the keyboard CV, the gate CV, and I think there's another CV that connects between them. However, because none of these sockets in this are actually present, they're not actually connected in this, which I think is quite a good thing, because I'm in an RM whether to actually disconnect the internal setup anyway for this. If you look at the back, you'll notice that all of the powers have just been wired via the actual where they connect to on the connectors. So yeah, it's not like a normal Formant Synth. And also the back connectors also added a bit of structural integrity to the circuit boards, because they're a bit flimsy without them. But this is either these modules have been taken out of another Formant Synth and popped into this box, or B, they've always been made like this and the person who built them just didn't bother with the sockets. Either is a possible kind of outcome. I'm really looking forward to having a look, because there's some notes on the back of the modules. I'm not going to read them yet. We're not going to ruin it for some of the videos. But it was described to be working. However, I've got to be honest, if I didn't know much about electronics, I probably wouldn't have any luck trying to turn it on. For starters, the power supply isn't even fudging connected. There's no connection on the power supply, and the power supply up here is questionably a bit. No, it's not lethal, because these are actually covered up, but it's not very ideal. It's a little bit dodgy. This isn't the original power supply. This is just a random modern kind of computer switching kind of thing. And if you look at the bus at the bottom, my gosh, I don't know whether you can see that, but it's just a hodgepodge. It's all over the place a little bit. It's all over the place, to the point that I haven't turned this on yet, because the first plan with this, I may as well mention the standard for the Formant synthesizer. The power standard is plus 15 volts, minus 15 volts ground, and also a 5 volts. So you've got a 5 volt bus as well. So there's 4 connectors that are connected. Not all of the modules use the 5 volt connection. I think the VCO's doing here. Off the top of my head, I think the rest of them just use plus and minus 15 volts. The great thing is about when we're looking at these circuits, it isn't particularly hard, and sometimes you don't need to change them at all to use 15 volt modules on a 12 volt power supply. Sometimes you could just get away, a lot of them you could get away with just using them, and some need slight adjustments, but not massively. So hopefully we can learn some things from this, because there will be a lot of parallels between this and if you've ever done modern DIY synth stuff and modern synths and stuff. So the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to make a power supply for it. I'm not particularly into this personally. I want to do it kind of a little bit neater. I want to sort out a bus board. So the plan with the power supply is I'm actually going to go for a wall wart style one. It's the one I tend to use. If anybody thinks that that's ridiculous, then please let me know. But I think I'm going to go for it. So the thing is with if you've ever seen the wall wart style ones, the ones that you see, they're made sometimes by Music from Outer Space. They're in some synthesizers, and Frequency Central, for instance, what they have is they've got some diodes, and what the diodes do is they take the AC signal, cut it in half. So there's one signal that's like that on the top, and there's one signal about the bottom stuff, and then there's a load of big chunky capacitors that basically smooth this cut off stuff into a solid line on top. So the capacitors act like batteries that stay in charge between the kind of modulation of the AC, and what that does, it gives you it smooths off the top one, that gives you plus voltage, smooths off the bottom one, gives you minus voltage from a single AC power supply, and then after that, this signal goes through a voltage regulator. In the instance of Music from Outer Space, Frequency Central and all of those kind of power supplies, they use ones that take it down to 12 volts. The 7812, which is a well-used, well-known power voltage regulator. They look like this, you'll know what I mean when you see that. And then there's also, and the 7812 regulates the positive voltage. So you send something in between what, like, I can't remember exactly, it's like 18 volts and, I don't know, 18 volts and above, a bit above 12 volts, maybe 13 volts or something, and it'll pull it down to 12 volts positive. And the 7912 will do the same for the negative version. They have different pinouts, so just double check about that. But there's a link below to the Music from Outer Space post about these kind of power supplies. And the great thing is you can use one of these power supplies to power 15 volt things. All you need to do is use, instead of the 7812 and the 7912, you just use 7815 and 7915. These are the voltage regulators that are for 15 volts, yeah? And then we also use another bit of the circuit to send out a little bit of 5 volts. It doesn't need much 5 volt in here, so I haven't figured out 100% how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make sure I do it. I'm going to design a circuit board in the next couple of days and have it down here. So it's going to act as the bus, because the bus is this random chunk of turret boards, wires that are just everywhere. And then hopefully after that, be able to get this all powered up. So the first video on this, we'll be looking at the power supply. A couple of people actually asked the other day on Patreon to explain how those big chunky capacitor kind of power supplies work. So this might go well with this. I think that'll be good for this chunk of mush of stuff. After that, it'll be worth trying to figure it out. And then after we've had a good look through it in a few videos, first one going to be the when I get the circuit board sorted for the power supply. Oh, by the way, I'll tell you, I forgot to say also, if you're going to do that with the 7815, you can also just, usually you get a 12 volt AC wall wart. This is an 18 volt AC wall wart, so we'll use this to take it down to plus and minus 15 volts. So this, instead of usual wall warts when they send out DC current, this sends out AC current, and then the AC current gets all chopped up like Chainsaw Massacre style to become the DC current, the plus and minus that we need for this thing. So this is just a 18 volt version of the one. If you've ever built DIY modular synths for 12 volts, it's just, yeah, a more voltage rating, yeah. So the plan with this after that is having this, it's gonna go in another room to the Cosmo and the other DIY modular synth that is currently in the museum. This is gonna be isolated a little bit, maybe with, if I manage to get hold of any of the other DIY things from this era, because very interesting, and they're really, the different approaches in this kind of era I think is really interesting when the outcome is somewhat similar. So this is going to be wired up in one of the new back rooms. It's going to be wall mounted, so it's going to be bolted to the wall. The keyboard's going to be below it, bolted to the wall, but also there's going to be a sync box next to it from the master clock. There's going to be a sequencer probably. So yeah, I think that'll just be quite nice. It's just another thing, a nice subject, let's say. So let me know whether you think, if you have an idea, if you agree what my thinking is for the first process of this, and hopefully this one will be quite a quicker thing, because I'm currently waiting on a few things for the telecommunication stuff to get that stuff. So this will be a nice project to do. So yeah, first thing, get our power supply done. Anyway, I hope everything's all right, and yeah, have a lovely time.